Lenin's theory of socialism and political praxis. Why to study Lenin? This is an important question. First, Lenin's heritage is a part of modern socialist thinking, a tradition. Second, he represents the first experiences of mixed economy in the modern history. So from this point of view, we can study three different phases after the Russian Revolution, in which the Soviet power had to find a solution on different problems. First phases, from market economy to war communism, 17 and 1918. Lenin, in his pamphlet, The Immediate Task of the Soviet Government, published as a Pravda insert on 28th of April, 1918. He intended to establish a concrete economic alternative to market-dominated production in an anarchically built capitalist society and the spontaneously growing and expanding national and international market system, in quotation mark, but which hadn't yet overstepped the limitations of the existing mixed market economy. True, he had already advocated the strictest and universal accounting and control of the production and distribution of goods. As the organization of the new method of production and distribution was not proceeding at the required pace and with the expected reach, Lenin concluded that the capitalist sector would have to remain standing. We have introduced workers' control as a law, but this law is only just beginning to penetrate the minds of broad sections of the proletariat, he wrote. Essentially, the expansion of state regulation to capitalist production and turnover of goods to the cooperatives as well may become a fundamental question regarding financial and market conditions in the transition leading to socialism. Lenin thought that the feasibility of socialism depended on the success that could be achieved in the field of combining the Soviet power and the Soviet organization of administration with the up-to-date achievement of capitalism. Apart from the cooperation and competition of economic sectors and modes of production, Lenin also spoke about the competition of communes and etched out its moral driving forces more clearly than its material and economic basis. In contrast to the allowances made to market and financial conditions and the bourgeois cooperatives, the socialist state can arise only as a network of producers and consumers, communes, which conscientiously keep account of their production and consumption, economize on labor, and steadily raise the productivity of labor, thus making it possible to reduce the working day to 7, 6, or even fewer hours. Quotation mark, that was the second period, war communism. I tried to characterize his position also very shortly. War communism was, however, a consistent system of compulsory state military measures. According to some writers, it carried certain traits of the state economic policy of German war socialism. Lenin kept the formation theory in sight even while making his most propagandistic political speeches, indicating that until his last day, he continued to view the history of the revolution through the lens of Marxist theory. Until March 1919, Lenin didn't even use the term war communism, and it so afterward mostly in quotation marks. This means that not just had Lenin not planned war communism in either theory or practical political terms, but also that the war communist measures only coalesced into a system much later, by the summer 1919. The naturalization of production and distribution, along with the introduction of the ration system and the persecution of private trade, were not a priori economic measures, but sprang from immediate political and social needs. NEP versus war communism, irreconcilable contradictions. Just as war, this is the third phase, NEP, new economic policy. Just as war communism was not the application of a theory, neither was the NEP the experiment or exercise of one. The Soviet government implemented both war communism and NEP under the pressure of concrete circumstances, requirements, and needs without foreseeing its internal or international effects. In both cases, their ideologies, the theoretical justification of the systems, were developed either parallel to their introduction or as a follow-up, though war communism incorporated a number of elements of German war economic, and the NEP, including elements from the market economy of the winter and spring of 1918. The NEP meant substituting militarized production, including the ration system, strict state distribution, compulsory appropriation of grain with money and market conditions, reinstituting free trade and introducing taxes in kind, as we know. Often forgotten is that, at the same time, the partial restatement of capitalist conditions entailed a general social transformation, a restructuring of social classes and groups, and a change in their relationships. Lenin had indeed made state capitalism central as part of the transition after the spring of 1918, but in a structured manner. The concept had an immediate political meaning. The Soviet state gave preferential treatment to organized large-scale capital and market-oriented state property rather than anarchic private property, the uncontrollably chaotic economy of the petit bourgeois. 25 million small estates in place of single large one, as you know. The grounds for this were that a capitalism overseen by the state was the only solution for an ordered retreat. Lenin called this a retreat compared with theoretical socialism. In concrete terms, he spoke about a step forward from the practice of economic policy under war communism, just as he had described the transitional period state as a bourgeois state without bourgeoisie. He spoke about the state capitalism without the bourgeoisie coming into being as a consequence of the NEP, as long as, and along with other developments, as the state enterprises will to a large extent be put on a commercial capitalist basis, quotation mark. That was in quotation marks. This was a real retreat from theoretical socialism. The concept of state capitalism is used in two senses here. On the one hand, as a sector of a mixed market economy. On the other, it is a term from formation theory denoting the economic method and arrangement for the transitional period and seen as a phase of it. It is a type of state capitalism, in quotes, that cannot be found in any textbooks, nor in the writings of Marx and Engels. The theory of socialism and its systemic coherences. The last problem. Lenin's theory of socialism fit this coherent structure in which each sector was composed of further subsectors and organizational forms. The special characteristic of direct communal ownership and production was realized either in the form of voluntary associations or by way of state mediation, though only in a small fraction of agriculture and industrial units or fields. He spoke about the possibility of coexisting state socialist and cooperative socialist enterprises, though a differentiation between the two forms of cooperative, state and self-government, would come due. By the mid-20s, 1920s, nearly 10 million people had been pulled into state-organized and state-subsidized consumer cooperatives. Lenin marked out explicitly that a shift must be made from the interpretation of socialism previously reached war communist state power and politicized to the position of cooperative socialism. Contrary to Lenin, Bukharin often defined the state economy as socialism. In both the ABC of Communism, he wrote with Preobrazhensky, and in his Transitional Economy. Stalin accepted it essentially. He made a turn to state socialism in practice, which existed until the end of 1991 in different etaps of development. We know different interpretations. Intellectual groups, politicians, and thinkers who consider the multi-sector economy of the NEP as socialism later identified the market socialists and took their inspiration from the late work of Bukharin, although he never actually called the market economy socialism, despite counting on the market economy continuing for a long time, even indifferently from Lenin. The second position, Stalin and his followers were called, in this sense, state socialists. In the 1980s, this trend finally merged with the market socialists, who had earlier been designated revisionists. István Mészáros gives a generous summary of the characteristic of market socialism's nature. Most importantly, he unmasks the common motives of social democratic thinking and so-called Stalinist tradition in the similar superstitious way of relating to state and market. Both camps position themselves rigidly in position to the conversion of state property into communal property. Both the traditional forms of labor division and the power of disposing with the surplus value remained with the scope of the detached apparatus. Every experiment that tried to reform this was undermined by the leaders of that party, even though Lenin had founded it with exactly the opposite aim. Though the later forms of market socialism were advertised and reformed state socialism, the first market socialism proved to be an evolved state of the second state socialism, which in the end led to capitalism. The third position, at the last, and I will finish it, the conception of socialism founded on autodynamic self-generating and the needs-based production, direct democracy, cooperative ventures, and the cooperative system of producer and consumer collectives traces back to Lenin's way of thinking and has a rather extensive historiography to its credit. Thank you for the attention.